Zuo, who is currently a director of the US Pharmacometrics Group at Astellas. Prior to that, she has over 14 years of experience working at various big pharma like Paraxel and GSK, working in wide therapeutic areas. And she received her PhD in applied math with a concentration in biophysics from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Additionally, she is a very active member of the Mathematics and Computational Science, MCS SIG, within ISOP. Our next panelist is Dr. Dhananjay or DJ Marathe. DJ has over 12 years of experience both in pharma and in regulatory agency working at the FDA. He received his PhD in chemical and biological engineering from the State University of New York at Buffalo, and then later went on to join industry, then followed by a stint at the FDA as a principal scientist leading the oncology development. And now currently he's a principal scientist at Merck, leading the oncology development program. And he's also very active with both ISOP and ACCP. Our third panelist is Dr. Cecilia Lawn. Cecilia is currently an associate director at Pfizer Clinical Pharmacology. Prior to that, she worked at AbbVie in the role of a clinical pharmacology lead for over 7 years. Cecilia has a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the University at Buffalo, and she too is active in the education committee within ISOP. So once again, welcome to all of you for joining this webinar. And we would request all the attendees, please feel free to ask any of your questions by typing your questions in the chat panel, in the Q&A panel. And we will make sure that we have adequate time to respond to all your questions. And welcome to our speakers again.
Thank you so much. We're thrilled to have you back. I'm going to give a quick recap and then we're going to, of last week's session. So our hope this week is that one, you got all your resumes done, you've built your social media profiles. Lee and I were thrilled with the number of invites we got to connect afterwards. So at least part of the homework was definitely completed. We are hoping today to take those preparation efforts and put them into your performance mode, to start looking around. How do you start searching for jobs and applying? How do you communicate with those in the process, prep and ready and for the interview process and offers? You're going to have access to all of these slides through the recording. So you might find we're going to go through content quicker today because we do want to leave as much time as possible, a half hour or more, for an engaging conversation. We can answer questions, we can talk through scenarios, things of that nature that you think really would help you better accelerate your career and advance to the places where you want to go. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over. I'm going to go on mute here and let Lee start by talking about searching for jobs.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be back along with Emily this week, and those who were here last week, welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the content today, workshop 2, which is where we are going to learn how to execute and perform after you have set up your online brand, have prepared your CV as we discussed last week, and how do we really leverage our knowledge in the marketplace to apply to the right jobs, get in the right place, and know where to start, essentially. So job searching and applying, this is often a space where people don't really know where to start, and especially coming to apply to jobs in so many different places. So we're going to go over how to navigate job sites, how to be targeted in your search, and what to do to make sure you're having a better understanding of what's on the other side of your application, like the applicant tracking system. So you're at the stage where you've thought to yourself that you may want to see what else is out there. You may be passively looking, or you may be actively looking, and there are dozens and dozens of job boards, and I'll break them out in the next slide because it really requires you to know what the job sites do and if a particular job site is the right place for you to start and the right place for you. They're all different. Like I said, I shared before, there's so many. I said dozens, but honestly, I could probably put a list of close to 100 job sites together if I tried. And I'll just go over the main ones in consideration of time. And they're probably the ones that jump out to you the most anyway. LinkedIn, we talked a lot about last week. It's often the first one that pops into people's mind, especially in these scientific or corporate settings. And what's interesting is LinkedIn is actually not a job board at all. It is a social media platform. We did outline that last week as well. It just happens to advertise jobs pretty frequently and as much as some other job boards out there. It's important to keep in mind who is on LinkedIn and who really lives in that space. And we talked about it last week also. Recruiters and hiring managers are very active in LinkedIn, whether that's searching for candidates, simply just sharing content and learning in the market and being connected with people in the same space. So a very good place to start when you're job searching, especially in the scientific area. Indeed is another great platform for so many reasons. There's actually, it's actually a search engine. So very much like Google, it is not a job board. It uses aggregate formulas, and it will pull job postings from other sites, as well as having direct postings as well. So what that means, in addition to having jobs that are posted directly by the employer, Indeed also pulls from other sources like other job boards or even better, company websites. We actually have the ability as recruiters, when we post our job on our career site, we can select when we want the job to go directly to Indeed. So a great source, and it's a pretty accurate representation of what's actually out there and active and posted by the employer. In terms of traffic, Indeed is probably the highest traffic job source out there. The last time I checked, it's close to about 280 million views per month, actually. So, and that's candidates, that's hiring managers, just really all the clicks that it gets. And if you compare that to Monster and Indeed, it's quite a big increase. Monster and CareerBuilder are actual job boards, not job engines like what Indeed is. So what that means is the employer has to pay to post their job directly on there. Both are very expensive for the employer to post and also to search the candidate database. Not that you can't use these sites, they're definitely great resources, but the time may be better spent on Indeed and LinkedIn to have a more accurate reach of what is out there due to them being so expensive.
Can I share a little hack?
Go for it.
So both hacks for LinkedIn and Indeed, and probably for a couple of the other boards too, you can set up a search for yourself and it will send you jobs that meet your search weekly. So if you go into your LinkedIn profile and you click on the jobs tab, you'll be able to set up a search, and it'll help you find out if the companies you are interested in working for, when a job is posted there, that would apply to you. And it'll send it to you. It'll actually send you the job link itself. So you don't actually have to go out and search these job boards or search these sites constantly. You can set them up to do it for you, and they will, on a weekly basis, send you jobs of interest. It's also just a nice way to keep track of your market. So I would highly recommend you do that. It just accelerates your search significantly.
Thank you. Work smarter, not harder, right, Emily? Make it work for you. A lot of these have some really great features where you can, like she said, set up jobs to come directly to you. So that's great information. The last one I'd like to mention today is Glassdoor, and I think it deserves a mention as it's becoming more and more popular in our industry. It was first created as a reviews site where you could go in and read reviews or write reviews. I know myself, when I've been searching for jobs, I always think if I want to go look and see what the company's about, I immediately think Glassdoor is going to have some really great, insightful information on what the company entails, former employee reviews, which aren't always super great. Keep in mind that people typically only write bad reviews and not good reviews. But now they have job postings as well. So you can, as an employer, post directly to Glassdoor. They are not cheap. So I don't know if this is really something that companies prioritize, but you can post on Glassdoor, and it's just a little bit more costly. The site itself is not technically free. It does require you as a user to write one review every 12 months to be able to have access to all of the information. After identifying where you'd like to search for your jobs, knowing which ones to apply to is equally important. So Pick the direction you want to go and don't over apply. Recruiters are reviewing applications every day, and they can see when a candidate is literally applying to every single posting that's out there. That's great and ambitious, but it can create the perception that you really just want to leave where you're at, you'll take anything, or you're simply just not reading the job description and doing a quick apply, which can be very frustrating. We talked a little bit about last session about how it's okay to have more than one resume, where you can emphasize a certain skill set more than the other to align with a particular job. This is something you need to leverage here. For example, know the audience. You may have sent an application in for a clinical pharmacology position, but have done both clin pharm and pharmacometrics. Often they do overlap a little bit. So for the particular application that you're putting in for a clinical pharmacology job, make sure you emphasize more of your clinical pharmacology experience while maybe putting the modeling and other software type of experience maybe later in the summary, just so you can show that you've done a little bit of both, but highlighting that clinical pharmacology experience. And then reverse that. If it's a clinical, a pharmacometrics role, you can reverse those and move them up to the top. Understanding technology on the applicant tracking system is also important, which we'll get into next slide. There was just too much content to really fit here. We did speak about last session on how to leverage your LinkedIn networking skills, which we can tie into this piece later. Sometimes you'll find a series of questions that may be discouraging because you have to click no for not having a certain skill set in the applicant tracking system. So when you go into the system, you may feel like you're going to knock yourself out of the interviewing process, and it might be, but it is important to be honest with these questions. Not all questions are disqualifiers, but some might be, but it can be frustrating when candidates don't tell the truth on those questions just so they can bypass the system, which doesn't really get uncovered until you have a phone screen, and then the perception changes. The candidate comes across as being a little bit dishonest. So it's important to recognize your weaknesses. If you're not qualified for the role, be honest. It just saves everybody's time. We've all been there where we're talking about putting our application in. It takes a really long time to fill in these mundane fields, so we'll try to skip some of the fields. It can be really tempting to rush through it and skip those, but recruiters go into a requisition every day when they see what new candidates come through. So they go in to review applications, and there's typically a summary of the candidate that's derived from the fields that you put in yourself. It's almost like a snapshot of your work history on the side in education. For positions that get a lot of volume, this feature is leveraged to weed out candidates who don't qualify at a glance before having to go in and download the resume. So take the extra time to put in those fields. It might get you a phone screen a little bit quicker if you're qualified. Emily talked a little bit about this last week. Make sure to stay away from odd formatting and fonts. She did speak a little bit about it last week, but I want to make sure that it's reiterated because it is really important. I've come across applications in our applicant tracking system where it just looks like a bunch of Roman numerals or other symbols, and you can't read it. So my recommendation would be to stick to simplified fonts like a Times New Roman, Calibri, just basic fonts that are going to translate into an applicant tracking system. Typically, when we see one that comes through that way, if we can, we'll reach out to the candidate to resubmit. But in higher volume type of roles, we may not have the time, and that may just get overlooked when you very well could be qualified for the position. Back in last week's presentation, we talked about the importance of keywords in your LinkedIn. The keywords are equally important here in your CV because most applicant tracking systems have the ability to rank your profile as low, medium, or high in terms of relevancy. So adding those keywords into your resume and application can help your resume get viewed more quickly. Oftentimes it'll pop up in a highlighted green as a high relevancy. So really making sure that your resume gets to that point is important as well. Next, we're going to talk about communication with recruiters. Step one, in my opinion, is really learning what the difference in an internal recruiter and an external recruiter is. An internal recruiter, Emily and I are both, for example, we're internal recruiters with Certara, so we work directly for the company. There's also a lot of really great external hiring resources that may support a company like ours and help send us candidates if we're having trouble. Most companies use an external search firm, but a way to decipher the difference is when they reach out to you on LinkedIn, you can see their email. If their email is associated with the company, you know that they're associated with the company itself and not an external recruiter. Both can be really excellent resources, but I would just know the difference because sometimes working with an internal recruiter versus an external, oftentimes you can get to a hiring manager a little bit quicker. Sometimes a knee-jerk reaction is to decline emails. We all get them. I get them. Emily gets them. We all get solicited for new jobs all the time, and it can be frustrating. Just know that you don't have to agree to look for a job if you hit accept. Sometimes accepting the message is just thank you, but no thank you. I'm good right now, but let's stay in touch. I really like to see that because when you decline a message, it prevents us as the recruiter from replying directly back to you. So in the event that you decline a message, we can't reply back with another job, and a few months later, we would have to go and send you another email or in-mail months down the road and kind of start from scratch. It's really helpful to accept it. That way we can follow back up when we do have a particular job posting, and then you can see our former communications and what the job was before. Be kind and professional when replying to recruiters. I know it's annoying. It can sometimes feel like you're being hit with telemarketers. I feel that way too when I'm solicited. Especially internal recruiters, when we get a unfavorable response that we maybe find unprofessional or rude, we do share that with the hiring manager. Oftentimes the hiring manager is working with us directly to reach out to a particular person that we see on LinkedIn. They may follow up and say, hey, did that person ever get back to you? And if it was a really unkind response, I've shared it with the manager himself, and this hasn't happened a lot. Most people are pretty great, but they're probably not the right fit. And we've identified that they're not the right fit culturally with our organization based on how they've responded. So just be careful. It's a small industry, but a big industry. So that would be my recommendation.
In 17 years of doing this, I have had managers decline to hire someone because of how that individual interacted with me.
Agree.
As a member of the team, right? My hiring managers are my colleagues, and we're working together to find talent for their team, for them to grow and advance. And I had a manager once say, I said, well, look, we were looking at the notes. They were like, oh, I don't like how they responded to you. I said, yeah, but they got your skill set, right? I was like willing to take the hit. And he said, no, I'm not interested in someone who talks to one of my teammates this way. I don't know how they would be with customers, clients, or other colleagues then. So it is important, I think, to do that. And I think what Lee said, which is critical, is if you get an email from a recruiter, it is absolutely appropriate to accept the invite, but to respond with, thank you, I'm glad to be connected, but I'm not looking for a job at this time. No further communication needed. You can say that. There's nothing inappropriate about that. But if you decline, we're blocked from you for some time. It becomes harder to actually contact you about something you might want. Sorry, I tagged on.
No, that's great. But yes, it has happened before. It's a big industry, but it's also a small industry, and you never know when you're going to be looking for a job. You very well may be gainfully employed now and have no interest in ever changing, but this industry does reduction in forces all the time. There's acquisitions and mergers. You never know when you're going to be looking, and I think maintaining relationships, regardless of what your intent is at that time, is important. Communicating with hiring managers. This is my last slide before I pass it off to Emily. This is something that I'm pretty passionate about because I think it can be overdone. I think it cannot be done enough. And knowing really the right area and space to live in is crucial when communicating with hiring managers. If you've seen a job online that you're interested in, it's pretty easy to find a potential hiring manager on LinkedIn by a simple search. So if you see a director of pharmacometrics at X company, you can Google director of pharmacometrics at blank company and see what comes up. There's a likelihood that you'll eventually find the right person. After you've applied for the job, there's nothing wrong with sending a note to them and saying, hi, thank you for connecting with me. I recently applied to this job and would love to chat with you and your team further. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to chat, or simply network if it's not a fit. If you're qualified, managers see these messages and will usually reach out to the recruiter directly and have them pull your CV directly from the applicant tracking system if they feel like it's a good fit to get you in process quicker. So I would highly recommend that to a degree. If they don't respond, I wouldn't recommend responding until they do. So that would be a good place to start and just see where it goes. After you've been interviewing or interviewed the entire process, send a follow-up email. That's great. Sending 15 follow-up emails is not great. The recommendation is to send a thank you email either same day or day after the interview. And if you haven't heard anything back, wait several days for a final follow-up for you to check back in. Even though it is in poor taste for a company to not respond with an update when you've asked for one, but sometimes it does happen. And keep in mind that there are reasons for the silence. They may have not been finished interviewing. Maybe the interviewing process got delayed. Maybe they're trying to put an offer together, best case scenario. Depending on the company, they may take longer than others to put an offer together. Or as all companies do, they may be experiencing some kind of a shifting priority that requires immediate attention, or what we like to call a fire drill. We all have those. And in your interview with a hiring manager, it's okay to ask for their email. Sometimes you may not be able to see them on an invite or the email address on the WebEx, but you can ask directly, and most of the time they'll give it to you because they're eager to hear from you too. So don't over communicate, but make sure your communication with the manager is thought out and methodical, and it goes a long way. I will pass this on to Emily.
Had to unmute myself there. All right, so you've applied for a job and you get a call, right? By the way, I do want to say this: apply for jobs you want. I've worked in-house for a number of companies in my life. I've been in big pharma with AstraZeneca. I've been out at Certara for 7 years, some other places, one other place in between, really. And what I would suggest is that not all internal recruiters can approach you. Depending upon who you currently work for, we may or may not be in a position where we're able to approach you directly about a position. So I may have the ideal job for you, and I may even know you're ideal for our job, but I might not be actually be permitted to send you that link. So if you see a job that you're interested in and you think to yourself, why didn't recruiter so-and-so contact me? They may not have been able to, but if you apply directly to a position, you can always be contacted by the recruiter in-house for that organization. So it's important to do that part. All right, let's get into interviewing. So you got to get your game face on, you got to get ready, you're going to get social, right? You're going to have to talk, you're going to get in front of everyone. So let's start, we're looking at those preps. First thing I would suggest you do is that before you go in for an interview, before you get on your first phone screen, research the company and know what their mission statement is, what is their underlying purpose, what are they trying to do, and how would your skill set and expertise be an asset to that organization. I say that because the number of times I've gotten on a phone screen with a candidate and they haven't been able, they go, so what does your company do? And I think, well, this conversation just went from 30 minutes to 45, because I'm going to take 20 to try to explain our company to people. So it's important. And what that says to me is, I'm not sure they really want this job. So if you are really interested in a company, then you should do a little research before you jump on the phone with someone who has scheduled time to chat with you. If we call you out of the blue, we don't expect you to know this in advance. If you take an immediate cold call, we get it. We're going to need to do some explaining and sharing. What my preference is in a phone screen is clarification of company mission and purpose, so that you can decide, does it align to who you are? Because we're now talking about, this has gotten real. When you get into the interview process and you're talking live, you've made a real decision and put yourself into the conversation. That's important. It's really important to know who you are, what you value, and what you want your career to look like now, because you're going to get wooed. So you're going to want to know where you stand. So come in with questions. You should never end an interview and say, nope, I don't have any questions whatsoever. Should always have a few. And some of the easiest ones to always ask, and you can ask it of more than one person because it allows you to test the theory, is what is your culture? What do you value in the people who work here? Where do you see this company in 5 years? What about 10? What do you think makes someone like me, right? What makes individuals in my position successful? You know you. Do you have those things? Is this the right place? Is this what you're going to get? So when you go in, I'm going to tell you for the interview itself, and we are in this new virtual world these days, right? And I know you only have to dress from the waist up. It's a screen. You got, but you should look professional. I'm old school, even on video. Dress for success, right? Show up in a way that you'd want to be presented to the CEO of that company or to your top client. So definitely dress for success. Whenever it is possible, turn on the camera so that you can see the person you're talking to and they can see you. It creates the opportunity to read body language. And without that, it's really hard. I'll even use it right now. This is the most difficult way for me in the world to present to a group of people. I can't see any of you. I don't know if you're asleep. I don't know if you've gone fisheye on me where you just dull over and are like this. I have no idea what the audience looks like. Same thing happens in an interview. I can tell the level of your engagement really quickly on a video call. And we can chat about that and see where it is. Because we're trying to find the right career for you. This is huge. It's a big part of what you do in life. It's part of your value. Be interactive, guys. This is not that you don't sit in a hot seat and they shine a bright light on you. This is a conversation with this company. So you should be interviewing them as they are interviewing you. And when I say that, this is not a criminal investigation. This is a conversation. So tell me more about that. You know, you mentioned such and such. That wasn't really clear to me. Could you share more? I'd like to have a better understanding of that. These are all just extenders that you could, in any conversation, that can get you there. Ask for clarity if you don't understand the question. Every once in a while, you're going to get a long behavioral interview question. And you get to the end and go, I have no idea what they just asked me, right? And we've all been there. I think I've asked those questions and not been sure what I've asked. That's one where you go, can you clarify that? What is it that you're in particular looking for? And then you go, oh, let me tell you about a time in my experience that has done that. At the end of your interview, follow up with interview questions. Ask things about whether or not you ask them completely. And that's the long behavioral ones. Always be you, because you're going to be you when you're in the job, right? So be authentic, be yourself, but be your professional, polished self, right? Not your t-shirt self, but your collared shirt self in that circumstance, because you do want to present as polished as possible while still being you. So if you are a little funny, it's okay it's okay to use humor in an interview. It's okay to talk. It's okay to talk about feel, things like that. You just want to make sure I know I'm asking you to thread a needle. This is where you'll want to work from that perspective. The next step in the process is you go through these behavioral interview questions. I will tell you, and I didn't touch on that too much because I want to give time to talk, is always be able to speak about what you have done. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Every recruiter in the world can recite that to you. We can recite to you what it means to be star format question, situation, task, action, result. We want to know what situation you were in. What was it you were supposed to do? What did you do? And what were the results of that? I will add one thing to that. What I love, because you're always going to ask the negative question, right? So tell me about a time that you were unsuccessful in a collaborative environment. Woohoo, who doesn't want to talk about that? That's the worst, right? That's a fabulous question for you to spin, because what you will do is say, oh gosh, so I was on a project and this, and this went wrong. Here's where I was part of the problem. Here's this. Here's how it resolved. But you know what? That was one of the most valuable experiences of my life because I learned something there. I learned not to do blank and blank. And you know what? I faced the same situation again later in a different project. And here is what I did differently that resulted in this success. See how I just took that negative question they asked you and turned it into the positive answer you wanted to give? Answer the negative, turn it to you. make it your success. Take confusion and ambiguity, turn it into, here's how I learned from something and made it useful and advanced our cause. That's a fabulous way to translate your experience. When you get to the end of the interview, please make sure you thank them for their time, and they should thank you for yours. Ask for the timeline of next steps. Say, hey, where are we in this process? By the way, if you're in the beginning, if you're their first interview, it could take a couple weeks. You may still be their number one candidate, but they have to do their due diligence through. So just ask, where am I in the beginning, middle? Where am I in your interview process? When do you think you'll have a decision? Confirm that you had a good experience and if you're interested in pursuing further. If, by the way, if you're not, it is absolutely fine to say that too. Hey, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. I think you guys are doing really great things. I don't think this is the right time for me. I really hope we do stay connected, but I want to withdraw from the process, and I think it would be, I don't want it to go any further. That's a perfect example. We will probably, as recruiters, go, why? What do we do? What do we say? And you might just say, no, you know what? It just doesn't jive with where I am right now, but definitely stay in touch with me and we'll move on. We can go from there. I will tell you, I had once a hiring manager do one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Poor guy used to do college recruitment. And this kid came in all prepared for their interview, and they got to the end and they were trying to be strong. The kid said to the hiring manager, is there anything I've said in this interview today that gives you hesitation to want to hire me? And the manager looked at him and he goes, well, there wasn't until you asked me that question. But now all I can think about are all the ways in which I think you got it wrong. The candidate turned their interview upside down. So avoid the negative question at the end. Don't say, did I leave you with any concerns? Don't ask that. Instead say, I'm interested in this position. Is there anything else you need to know about me? Have I been able to answer your questions thoroughly today? I really want you to know, I think this would be a good next fit. All right, you get the offer. We're getting to that point, right? So a couple things, understand your market value, managing more than one offer, notifying your current employer. In terms of understanding your market value, I know you all know how to Google search. You're all going to go on Glassdoor. You're going to go out there and you know what you get paid today. You're going to look at all of these things that are out there. I'm going to tell you that they have partially true information. Almost every internal recruiter you deal with also has market information that they're pulling out of specific tools used for this. So when you get into a conversation with a recruiter, and I actually did the math the other day, and I have made well over 1,000 offers in 17 years. So I went, oh God, that's a lot. So when I thought about that, I thought, what do I know? You never have to share your current compensation with me. In a lot of states, it's illegal for me to ask you what you make. Not every state, but most. But there's nothing wrong with me asking you, where do you want to be? What are your expectations? You should know what those are. You want to know what you're expecting. So you save time and energy in those conversations. Also, by the way, Leah and I, as internal recruiters, we're negotiating on your behalf. So the more you can share with us to help us understand your circumstance and how we can negotiate internally for you, the better off we are, because that helps us go back and forth between, and it's never just one hiring manager, it's a team of people who make decisions. So we go back and forth. So it's really helpful that you're able to share expectations. You establish a relationship with the person who is negotiating internally on your behalf. The other thing I would say to you is, know what's most important to you. Is it a compensation goal that you're aiming for? And that might be where you are in your career. Or is it a certain amount of experience you're looking for? And be willing to know which you're compromising on if you're asked to. Be patient. Some companies have pretty long due diligence process. It does not lessen your candidacy. Doesn't mean they don't want you. Might mean that they actually have a lot of hoops to jump from. I would also recommend you definitely get a full picture of what benefits and total comp look like for that company, because it's not all base salary. Sometimes there's really good bonus programs, that long-term incentive, things of that nature. All right, negotiating for more. It is okay to ask for more, but then it also has to be okay if the answer is no. The answer might be no. Internally, as a recruiter, what I will tell you is that we're trying to build the foundation, strong roots. That's why this image struck me. Strong roots for your career growth and a key to success for the organization. We're actually trying to make it a win-win for everybody, right? You and the company. You're paid fairly. They're getting paid fairly for what you do. So find out what's most important to you around what you need. If you do decide to ask for more money, more PTO, more flexibility, whatever it is, come in with a justification for why. What are you currently doing or having that isn't going to translate over? I've had individuals ask me for a sign-on bonus, and I'll go, well, we don't just hand them out. What is it that you're looking? Why? And I had somebody once, and I'm not telling you which company I was working for. I was probably everyone at some point. They go, I just wanted to ask. And I was like, well, that's not the justification. Help me understand why. What are you leaving behind? So know what you might leave behind if you take this next job. I will tell you, titles mean nothing from company to company. A VP in one company is a senior director in another, and as a consultant in another. The titles don't transfer. Good recruiters and good employers can look at your resume and determine by your responsibilities and advancement of what you do, more so than by your title, to determine your career growth. So try not to get too stuck on a title. And if a recruiter is unable to make that adjustment, you're not working with the right person, you want to talk to someone else. Because what they should be looking at is, what have you done and how does that match what you will be doing, not what your title was and does it match the new title. The titles aren't the critical component, what you've done is. All right, almost there. Last slide for me. Notifying your current employer, and if you have multiple offers and things about those things. If you have multiple offers, you have really one big question to ask yourself. If these offers were identical, which job would I take? My answer to you is 9 out of 10 times you should take that job. Because if that's the one that's doing what you want to do, you should go do it. Now, if they're not making you the better offer, go negotiate with your top choice. But take your top choice and negotiate. Give them a reason to go up or to make a negotiation for you. Because companies, if they've gotten to the point where they're making you an offer, they want you as a person. This is beyond just the financial aspect of it. They're invested in you as a person. At least I know Lee and I are always invested in our candidates. Like we get real close. Then you start, we don't talk to you for weeks until we see you in a meeting. We're like, hi, it's weird not to talk to you anymore. We talked so much before we got there. So it's really important to get to that point. Notifying your current employer is one that is always really hard for folks. You, by the way, never have to disclose where you are going. You can turn in a resignation with your employer and just give your 2, 3, 6-week notice, whatever it is you've agreed to do with them. You don't have to tell them where you're going. They may make you a counteroffer. And if they do, know why you wanted to leave and know why you would stay. Because if why you wanted to leave isn't going to change, 6 months from now, you might be in the same situation that you're in today, and you will have wished you took the other offer. So that is one where I would say that is a lot of deep thought on that part around why you would leave or stay within your current company. That's worth discussing. All right, I'm going to stop there because I was going to stop at 10:30, but I went 11 minutes. So we had 20 minutes to chat and answer questions. So I want to open the floor.
Just adding on one real quickly, when notifying your employer, be prepared for a counter offer and go in ready to, if you know you're going to get a counter offer, be prepared on what you're going to do. What would it take for them to keep you? And do you really want to stay? Most companies nowadays will do some kind of a counter. So go in with the mindset of what you're going to do in advance, so you are prepared to give that answer to them.
So I know our panel has some questions, Gary, but I do have a write-in one. Can I answer that one first?
Absolutely.
Would you be talking about how to progress in existing jobs? Absolutely, I can give you some advice on career development. I used to actually do quite a bit of that before. I highly recommend you make your and you know, I'm not the best at this myself. Sit down with your manager and say, today I am this. I want to be this within the next 6, 12, 18 months, whatever it might be, and say, I want to build a career plan to get me there. You own the plan, but you get them to agree to it. and you see this is where I want to advance and where I want to go. So from a progressing in an existing job is very much understanding the career ladder in front of you and what you have to do to get there. So I would ask that question of my manager. I would also recommend on occasion you say to your manager, hey, may I speak with your manager about career progression as well? I'd really like to be in a position to better understand maybe how they see my work, where they see me going. There's nothing wrong. There should be, most managers should be okay with you talking to their manager, especially about your career development. That part's part and parcel for where you're going. So without question, I would recommend that you do that. But you need to build a plan. You need to ask questions. You will need to own it, because we all know how regular day-to-day work goes. You get this great plan, but then you're so busy you can't get back to it as frequently as you want to. Sorry, I was reading the next question at the same time. Does it look bad to overshoot the initial salary range when asked? Similarly, when moving from a postdoc salary into industry, how do you know what a reasonable salary range is? So one, I always say ask around. Right? Ask around, go to Glassdoor, go to Google, go to salary.com. Those are all places. The other thing you could do, by the way, is some companies will post their salary ranges on their job postings. So you can look them on the job postings as well. Does it look bad to overshoot the initial salary range? I don't know if it looks bad. It just looks like maybe you don't know, right? What it shows is a lack of information. You're not sure. By the way, it's okay to say at the end of that, if you said to me, and we're way off, and you say, I want this, and they go, whoa, we're way off from each other. And I would be the one who would say that to you. Go, oh no, we're way off from each other. It's okay to say to me, well, I wasn't really sure. So, I just had heard, and this, so curious, where do you think is reasonable? And you can have that conversation. I highly recommend you have the conversation with their internal recruiter and not the hiring manager. Let your recruiters, at least in my job, the recruiter's job is to work that stuff out for you. That's been my experience. If your manager, by the way, is not responsive to your career planning, you build your plan anyway, and you meet with their manager.
I guess one of the other questions that is coming through for the panelists and for the speakers is that how do you make the justification for things such as increased flexibility or more paid time off, especially coming from a grad school or postdoc position?
So I don't want to say everything's negotiable. So it depends on the company. Sometimes they have fixed set to dates. Sometimes you can't get more PTO, by the way. They may be set at what they are. Sometimes they can't give you additional things of that nature, but it doesn't hurt to ask. You can say to them, this is important to me. Is there flexibility? Or the other question to ask is, if some companies, they'll give you 15 days of PTO to start once you've been there, and they'll give you a day a year for the next 5 years. Now you're at 20, and they might cap out at 25. Ask them about their long-term PTO, because those things exist. Our company is in a unique space. We do flexible PTO. We have no set amount of days. So it's really between you and your manager how many days you get off that year or take off. It can vary. But it should be within that space that did I answer that question? I think so.
And I think maybe now I would give our panelists a chance. So sure. Panelists, please feel free to ask questions of our speakers.
Lee and Emily, that was a very informative presentation. Congratulations on the job well done. I have a few questions, but in the interest of time, I'll just ask the first. If there's a time left in the end, I'll ask the rest of the questions. Normally during a interview, almost every candidate will be asked the question, the big question of tell me about yourself. Can you share some tips or strategy to answer this question well?
Sure. So first, make sure it aligns to that profile statement in your resume. And there's your elevator speech, right? Here's how it translates from writing to real life, which is tell them who you are, right? This is the opportunity to this is the one question that you can answer however you want. It's not a behavioral base. So this is the one where I would usually say, well, I got into this work because of X. This is why I love what I do, right? This is why I do this work. These are the things I've learned, and I think are the most valuable skills and assets that I bring to an organization. It's why I applied for your job. Your position is asking for somebody who has X, Y, and Z. And those are things that I'm not only very experienced at, but committed to doing excellent work with as I go forward. Boom, everybody write that down, and you can all use that one, right? That's that sales pitch. So that would be what I would ask when somebody did it. And literally, you could do it as fast as I just did. 25 seconds, answer the question. This is who I am. This is what's important to me. This is why, this is what I'm good at. This is what led me to apply to your job. And this is why I think this would be a good place.
I think also this question gets misconstrued, and I think that they're asking, tell me about your entire career. And that's not what that is. They're not asking you to map out and talk about your resume and career progression. This is about you, what you do, why you like what you do, what you're looking for, and why you're interviewing.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Go ahead, DJ.
Yeah, hello, Evelyn Lee. Actually, it was a great presentation. I had one question regarding the resume as to, do you have any advice on how to handle a resume that has, say, frequent transitions with roles of, let's say, very small duration in multiple organizations? Whether you want to list out all the spectrum of experience or just selectively highlighting prominent roles with substantial experience as such.
So if you're talking about within one company and you've made advancements, what I recommend on a resume is name of company, total years there. Then the next thing down should be the first, and it should be indented. So it's clear it falls under this, right? So I've been at Certara for 7 years, 2014 to present. My first job was staffing manager, right? So the next thing that we director of talent acquisition. I'd have a couple of statements, global talent, director of global talent acquisition, oversee all recruitment for the organization, blah, blah, blah. Next one down would be associate director, talent acquisition, lead talent. I had direct reports, manage talent acquisition team for the RNA team. You bounce it in. If you have things that have made a move from one position to another that you feel you need to explain, put a sentence underneath. So company, years, title, put a little sentence right under it that says, I moved to this position because blah, 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 right? Give a reason on why that transition was there, especially if you moved laterally within the company, right? I would add a statement at the top that says, I've worked for Certara for this many years, and I have made several lateral moves to advance my skill set and blah, blah, blah. And then I'd list my titles and things below. It just tells your story a little bit better there. Does that help answer your question? If there's if there's gaps in your work experience, you could do the same thing, right? You can talk about, you can add in there that there was something else happening if you want to explain. Or if there's frequent changes for you from company to company, you jump from different employers. I even just use the term jump, right? And everybody's scared to be a job hopper, all of that. If you think that that is what your resume looks like, write a sentence that explains why.
I've seen resumes also where they have their employment, they're at sponsor A, and they've been there for 10 years, but it shows one job title and it's the highest job title. And then when you get on the phone with the candidate, they actually say that they started at a much lower level and worked their way up, and they haven't been in that higher level position for as long as it initially looked like. I think you may think it comes across that you aren't as qualified, but in fact, to show that career trajectory and show that you've been promoted from within, even if you did start at a lower level and you may not have been in that position for as long as you wanted it to portray, it sometimes can look better because being promoted within is harder than going externally and taking a promotion. So I think showing that on your resume, don't be afraid to say that you started as a entry-level scientist 10 years ago and worked your way up, but make sure that's portrayed, because I think that shows a lot more than you think it would, saying that you've been a manager for 10 years.
Thank you. Another small question before I hand it over. Is that okay, Gauri?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. So, I mean, do you have any advice on how to highlight experiences and achievements without appearing overqualified in a resume for applying for a job? Let's say you're applying to broaden your experience or expertise from like transition from a director position in an industry to a reviewer role in regulatory agency. So how do you achieve that without sounding overqualified?
I would just state it outright in the profile statement for my application, right? Which is say, experience such and such applying for this position. I understand some of I understand that I meet your qualifications and maybe even extend them in certain areas, but this role is bringing me an experience I won't get otherwise. And I absolutely want this experience. And then you chase that recruiter until they're willing to talk to you. And they either tell you no, which can happen, or you get to them and they say, so tell me what, DJ, tell me why. All right, fine, you got me. Tell me why you're overqualified. Tell me why I should put you in front of this manager. Now, just know overqualified can sometimes mean that you make more than they can pay for that job. So you may have to understand that they're not going to move up to where you are for a position you've applied for. So if you are making a lateral move or a move that doesn't necessarily go up the financial ladder, expect the offer to reflect that. I'll state that as well. Somebody asked an offer question on here. I can address at the same time. I think Andrew did, amongst others. There are ranges built around jobs. We aren't coming up with a number out of a hat, right? That's not how any company with character integrity is not making an offer out, making up a range for a salary. We don't look at what you currently make and go, well, gosh, we don't even have to bring you into range. That's not appropriate. We're going to bring you in to the range for that role because that's the right thing to do. It aligns for equity. There's a whole bunch of HR reasons why we do that, right? So if you are in a position, know that if you're taking what might be perceived as a step down, you might have to come down a little bit. Eventually get back up there, but you might have to make that adjustment. If you're new entering the world and the PhD student trying to figure out where you are from a salary negotiation standpoint, ask. I know it's incredibly uncomfortable, but when you get to the point where you get your first offer and you get it, you can look at it and say, hey, this is really, first, I'm thrilled and I'm super excited. I really was hoping that I would be making closer to blank. Can you get me any closer to this number? Maybe, maybe not too, by the way. Sometimes we've set, especially at entry level, they may have set at what they are. What I can tell you is, remember, that is just where you're starting. That is not where you're finishing. So come in, kill it, and you'll get a raise and you'll get a promotion. So some of it is, sometimes you have to get in and you got to prove it, and then you get there.
Great advice. Thank you.
Just before Cecilia asks her question, quick thing is, I know this webinar is being recorded and I think the material will be shared with you because that's one of the questions. And I think one other question for Emily before you proceed, because I know you're typing in the answer, but I think it might be great to share with everybody. So I think this question is from Andrew Markey asking that I'm in my final year of my PhD program, and what should I do, if anything, to leverage negotiating the salary, given that, you know, anything from a PhD salary is much higher. So I think if you have any tips, Emily, and then Cecilia, you can ask your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was what I was speaking to a little bit around moving into, coming out of academia and going into an industry role or a consultancy role, right? Going into the non-academic world, the commercial world. When you're going into that, know one, that they may have set salaries in place. You don't know. I'd ask the recruiter. When you first start talking to them and say, hey, look, I'm looking at all my options going into industry. By the way, always mention when you're going in entry level, you're looking at all your options going into entry level. So I'm really interested in the program and this position that you guys have here. Is there, and ask them, is there a baseline? How do you determine the value of this job? You could put it on them to answer a little bit too. But ultimately, this might be the one where sometimes you've got to accept what is offered to you when you first get into the role, and then you're able to build and go from there. Nobody likes that answer, by the way, right? It's the one where you're like, shoot, can I get more out of it? Maybe a little bit. But ultimately, what you're trying to get is the experience that advances you 5 years from now. That's more important than where it is today. Skills. Are skill lists useful? They are, especially on technical jobs. So if we're asking for specific modeling, software techniques, any of those specific, very specific techniques that you're looking for, make sure it's on your resume. so we can CV, so we see it. I'm actually reading the questions too, Gary, down the side.
No, I just thought I would give Emily, Cecilia a chance.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very nice presentation and talk. Thank you so much, Emily and Lee. My question is, I guess, is for maybe entry-level interviewees. Yeah, what is your recommendation? You know, after an interview, we talk about, you know, you want to send a follow-up email, probably with the HR specialist as well as the hiring manager. But would you also recommend the interviewee to actually send a thank you email or text to everyone who he interviewed on that day?
Sure. If we've been generous enough to give you the email address of everyone you interviewed with, right? Because that's you don't always get that. When I worked in big pharma, I wouldn't give you the email address of my internal managers. It was funny. So you can always do this, which is if you don't have the email addresses of everyone involved, you can send one to the recruiter that simply states, "Would you please share this with the interview panel?" And you can send a general thank you that says, "Thank you to so-and-so," name them, why you're, you know, what you enjoyed, whatever it might be, and sign off. You absolutely can send a thank you note. I think it's awesome to do so. If you can't reach them directly, send it directly to your recruiter and ask them to share with the interview panel.
Okay.
That'll save you there.
Thank you.
So I see another question in the Q&A window about the importance of having a one-page resume. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure, and I'm dominating, Lee. If you want to jump in here, rock, paper, scissors me, and get on there, right? I would say the first page is the most relevant. Here's why. It's going to Lee and I, and we aren't scientists, right? We have an understanding of the science that you're looking for, but we're not getting into all the depth. So we're looking for the things that clearly check about 8 boxes for us that you meet the qualifications for the job. So that first page should be really clear, concise, and understandable. Page 2, you can always add, right? The back page is where you start to add, if it's a CV, you're adding your publications, things of that nature. You can always add a little bit on the back side that just simply states my vision for my career, and you can put a paragraph there. These things are not written in stone. You could create a resume that looks different than anybody else's. And there's nothing wrong with doing it, just as long as it follows a decent format that my ATS can upload. But you really can spell out. The second page is where I say you can be a little looser with describing you, but that first page should have your skills, your experience, your education, and everything relevant to the job you're applying for.
And brevity is not always necessary. If you have 20 years of experience, the expectation is not to fit it on one page.
Yes.
You want the information that's needed to show that you're qualified initially to be up top close to where we're going to see, but your experience should reflect 20 years of experience if that's what you have, and your resume should be longer than one page. Otherwise, the scope of work that you've been doing doesn't read as complex enough for what the job is that we're looking for.
Thank you very much for this answer. I see we're already out of time. I just want to leave I just want to leave a last opportunity for the panelists to ask a last minute question before we stop. So CC, DJ, Pei Ying, do you have a burning question to ask?
I have a remaining one, if possible. I'll make it short. So how would you compare working with a recruiter than contacting the HR on the LinkedIn associated with the position that you are interested in? What's the pros and cons maybe?
If you know you want to work for a specific company, contact that internal recruiter without question. Always go to them first. They have a much closer contact. If you're not sure where the next company is that you should work with an external recruiter. They're going to help you find multiple employers. It is not unusual. I've talked to people and said, this is probably not the right place for you, but I know of places that might be good, but that's rare for me to do that kind of thing. For me, I hire for Certara. That's my employer. These are the people I love to work with every day. I'm bringing you here. I'm not going to send you elsewhere. If you're not sure this is the right, if you know you want to come here, the best way to build relationships internally is to use the internal recruiter for that company. If you are very unsure of where you want to go next, search firm agencies, external recruiters can help you gain a landscape right? They'll give you a view of the greater landscape. That fair, Lee?
Yeah, if you know where you're wanting to go, I would highly recommend internal recruiter. Keep in mind that search firms cost money to the employer, and that's fine. If that's where you want to go, save the company money. If you already know, just cut that step out and go straight to the internal.
You saw my eyebrow go up with the external, right? I'm an internal recruiter. I have a hard time with it, so I'm aware of my bias. But yeah, without question, if you can go internal, you are a much more viable candidate for them, especially if they don't have search budget. So
Thank you.
yeah.
That's very helpful.
Thanks a lot. Cecilia and DJ, any last minute burning question?
Yeah, I guess I can ask one more. Yeah, I prepare that. So we talk about the development plan. So I guess this really depends on the your manager, your boss. But what is your recommendation of revisiting the progress or on your development plan with your manager, like once you have a job?
So I would first say your development plan depends mostly on you. 90% of that is you. 95% of your development plan is owned by the individual. And then you're going to spend the other 5% of it getting your manager on board to helping you advance it where you want it to go and what you want it to do. So I would say that when you're looking at your development plan, and when we send out the recording of last week's, I can give some additional resources. You really are looking at what are your short-term goals? What do I want to do in the next 12 months? Then what do I want to do in the next 12 to 36 months? And then what am I looking at in the 3 to 5 year plan? And what's my overall vision? So it's really around understanding the baselines of why you're doing what you're doing and where you want it to get you, right? So you do want to kind of write your, it's the eulogy project, right? Write your eulogy. What's your professional eulogy look like? If someone was to read it, what were the greatest accomplishments? Did you achieve what you want to achieve in that statement? And then build your plan to meet that. You guys have all done that in some crazy college program, right? Where they ask you to write how you'd be looked at the end. It's the same thing for a career. What do you want it to look for? And then build backwards from there. Did I answer that?
Yep.
I felt like I didn't answer as directly as I should have. Okay.
DJ, one last question before we close the webinar.
Sure. So it's really a perception question on social media presence. Is there something as too much publicity? Because you come across profiles who would really put it out there, their achievements every so often. That's really exhausting. But at the end of the day, you end up remembering them when it comes to opening a new company.
Can I quote Madonna that all publicity is good publicity? I'm kidding. We do not do what Madonna does. We're not in the same field, right? Different industry. So I would say, is there too much? Yeah. You can, by the way, you can contact recruiters too much. You can contact hiring managers too much. You can come across a little too eager. So I think a regular communication, a reach out, a connection, a like, a share, that's not bad. I think when you're liking, sharing, and you're on and you're reading posts, and you might make a comment on a post that you like it, I think those things are probably fine and they're not overreaching. I think if you sent a communication and you don't hear back, you need to wait at least a week. By the way, people go on vacation and don't check their LinkedIn profile. I try not to. Some people are better. Lee is so much better than I am. I am a delayed responder. Some of you got your acceptance from me yesterday because I was behind. But so just be aware that there's, other people have lives. There's stuff going on for them too. So it could take a week or two to respond. So if it takes a week or two, then you could, say, hey, this might have fallen to the bottom of your inbox. Just want to connect. Boom, and reset. Simply like that. If you've reached out 3 times, you're not getting a whole lot, then you probably are like, going to find another way.
Before we wrap up, to add on to that, when sharing and wanting to know if you're oversharing, think about 2 things. One is what I'm about to share on brand with me and what I'm trying to portray myself as on LinkedIn. And 2, do people need to know this? Does it benefit them at all to know this? With a certification, it could, if you're in the job market and they're looking for this particular certification, it very well may be relevant to the audience. Do they need to know you renewed it 4 times in the past 5 years? Maybe not. So I would think about it in that way.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. I see we're already 7 minutes past the end of the hour or the beginning of the hour. So I think we should close the meeting now. Thanks a lot, Emily and Lee, for your very engaging discussion. And thanks to all the panelists for the very interesting questions. I see there's still a few questions in the Q&A box. We will make sure to address them by text or by email or by typing, I should say. And as Gowrie mentioned, this webinar has been recorded and you'll be receiving the link to the recording when it is available. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice end of day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.